Hi everyone, I'm Gomar from wod-science, and today I had the pleasure to talk to André Houdet. André is an elite CrossFit athlete who went to the games 3 times. He recently shifted gears to become a full-time coach, and we talk about the physiology of elite coaching as well as programming and using wearables into your programming. I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I do, and without further ado, let's go straight into it. So hi, Andre. Thanks for coming on the podcast. How have you been doing the last couple months?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. I've been doing really good. It's different life now, full-time coach and of course dad and fiance and those other roles as well. But from a professional standpoint, just
Busy days.
yeah, it actually is a lot busy. I don't know how I managed to train so much prior to this, but I think just when you immerse yourself fully in the new role, then there's also so much to do and so much to learn and yeah, it's kind of been busy and hectic in a good way.
That's always fun. It's boring when it's not busy. I always say.
Exactly.
Tell me a little bit. I was looking into some old articles of you. It's quite funny in the barbell spin. I found a funny quote of you that said that you, in like for your background, you moved to Paris when you were young, right? And you said that you actually joined CrossFit Louvre as your first CrossFit because you were searching for a shower because you didn't have that in your apartment. Is this true, or
Yeah,
that's a quite a funny
I mean
story?
it's pretty much true. Like I moved to Paris because I'm half French and my dad he sends all of the kids to
Yes.
France for 1 year. So when I finished what we call
Okay.
gymnasium, which is kind of like a thing right in between
Hmm.
college and high school, that's sort of mandatory. He sent me there, and the apartment that I got didn't have a bathroom, didn't have a shower. It had a toilet in the hallway,
That's crazy.
but no shower. And so I asked the landlord, I'm like, where am I supposed to shower? He's like, get a gym membership or something. And
That's funny.
but at this point I'd already discovered CrossFit. I had just done it like for a little bit. I'd taken my L1, so
Okay.
I'd been down to Paris before to take my
Okay.
level one and seeing the gym and so I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna have to train every day if I'm gonna shower every day. So and that I like to do. So
That's awesome.
so every day after work, I went to the gym and trained and showered, and so that was kind of like that was definitely the early
That's
beginning
that's
of my CrossFit career.
that's how it should be, right? Like the early grassroots ideas about CrossFit. That's nicely exemplified there. Um, we have done a video, and also I've done looked at some of the data on elite CrossFit athletes, and it seems that many of the elite CrossFit athletes, like Fraser, Froning, Khalifa, and others, when they started or when they got onto the scene as a games athlete, they almost immediately finished there on the podium as a
Hmm.
rookie. So that's quite interesting. So it seems that although the sport is super young, obviously, that talent should be very early on there.
Hmm.
Clearly, because I mean, you don't make it to the podium if you just start at the games, right? So also for you, I mean, obviously as a 3 times games athlete, also yeah, of course, highly skilled, highly elite. Did you recognize that talent almost immediately at CrossFit Louvre, or did you beat immediately all the other guys in the normal classes, or how did that go actually?
Um, I mean, first of all, I think that talent genetics definitely plays a very big factor, and I see it more and more the more
Yeah.
I design programming and I see how different people respond to different things. Not only from
Yes.
a, of course, not just genetic standpoint, but also just some people just have a much larger talent. So they also there's like the genetic standpoint from a physiological standpoint, and then I think there's the other
Hmm.
standpoint is like the trainability, the coachability aspect,
Yes.
and
Yes. Adaptability to training.
exactly. And I don't know if that's genetics or if that's just you've done a lot of sports as a kid and you're good at picking up cues, you're good at picking up things quickly. But those are kind of the two things. And I think for me, was definitely low in the genetic talent pool, and maybe high in the adaptability talent pool. So all of the skills came
That's
very
interesting.
quickly.
Yeah.
Like I learned all the gymnastic skills by just having my computer with me down in the CrossFit gym and putting up like ring muscle up videos and then just learning it like that. Or learning it mid workouts.
Learning it.
Like I would pick up butterfly chest to bars without having ever practiced it. And I think just so from that standpoint, I picked up things really quickly. I also had good mobility, which helped a lot with the lifting. And I think,
It helps.
yeah, and then I think from a genetic standpoint, I have never been a very aerobically prone, so I think I had a lot more type 2X muscle fibers and therefore a lot more explosive. So the
Yes.
weightlifting came very quickly. The first time I did clean and jerks in a global gym, I clean and jerk 110. And I had never ever
Yeah.
tried it
Okay.
before. The first time I snatched 75
Yeah. Yeah.
in running shoes. So I think like all of those things came, especially the lifting came very rapidly. I think within 1.5 years, I
Yeah.
was snatching 130 and clean and jerking 150. But I could barely front squat 150.
Yeah.
But as soon as I could put it
Yeah. Yeah.
in a
That's it.
very dynamic momentum based kind of setup, I could definitely fire a lot more muscle fibers and so I think from that type of standpoint, maybe though I was lucky in that sense. But I definitely wasn't like I don't think anybody had me in their cards when I started CrossFit, and it wasn't like oh this guy is just amazing. From a lifting standpoint, like Eric from Weightlifting 101, he like found me just when I started CrossFit,
Yep.
and I was put in contact with him, and he helped me massively. He also helped me, which I also think is a different, another aspect of like the genetics, the adaptability. And then there's this third aspect, which is finding a person that can um, elicit some sort of confidence in yourself and believe in yourself. And he just did that really early on. He was like, you can become really good if you take it serious. And this has nothing to do with genetics
Yeah.
or talent, but it just has something to do with this sort of belief that a coach or a parent or a friend can create in you, which makes you,
Yes.
I would almost say, like override some of the other things. If somebody says you can do it and you trust that person, you probably can do it. So I remember in the beginning, there was
Yeah.
like a very rapid progress, especially in the lifting, because Eric, well, basically, Eric, he said, I didn't have a lot of money, and the sessions, there was like small group sessions with 4 people, and he would always set like
Yeah.
a target. He's like, if you hit this weight, you can join the next class for free. And it kept going like this. I was like, well, I can't afford the classes, so I just need to, I need to keep hitting the targets. And so, yeah, so in regards to the conversation with
That's how it works.
genetics and talent, I don't think I had much talent and much genetics, but definitely very coachable, which made the progress
Yeah.
steady.
I, I mean, that's yeah. It's always obviously difficult to separate those two. It's clearly also a form of talent to pick up motor skills and
Mm,
to be able to lift heavy weights, obviously.
maybe.
But what you're referring to, if you would have been put on a treadmill and said, "Okay, Andre, we're going to do a VO2 max test or test a 5K run test," the coach wouldn't have picked you as being the top athlete that you later became,
No,
right? So
no.
a rather strength biased and less endurance. That's super interesting because we talked about this with John Singleton from the program as well. He said that I mean it's quite clear that CrossFit is quite strength
Hmm.
biased still, right? If you cannot snatch 275 as a male, 190 185 as a woman, you are not going to make it to the semis or maybe the semis but not the games,
Hmm.
right? Even though you could have the best engine in the world and be an amazing triathlete. So which is different, for example, than high rocks, which are all also these hybrid sports that are popping up. CrossFit, if you look at CrossFit per se, it seems to be a bit more strength
Hmm.
biased, which is fine. I mean, no commentary on that. It's just how it is. And I think as a coach, which you are now, you definitely have to think about this and dial the training towards this, because if you don't make the bell curve, you're not going to make it as an elite
No,
athlete.
exactly,
So
exactly.
that's definitely interesting. So maybe we can talk about this. So you were obviously a very yeah, coming up athlete, doing really well at the games. Also, your lifting has been praised by many people. Clearly, also your technique, obviously. And then you quite suddenly you made the shift towards coaching. Maybe you can tell us, the viewers, a little bit about this, and also tell about your idea about coaching and on your platform.
Yeah. Yeah, I've actually been coaching since almost since I started CrossFit. So I started my first
Okay.
coaching company, online programming specifically, in 2015 called Trinity, together with my fiance and another friend, where we also did one-on-one individualized programming for CrossFitters. Obviously, at this point, I only had 1 year of experience,
Okay.
so it was and like every year it keeps getting better, and I didn't have that much knowledge back then, but effort was 10 out of 10, and maybe delivery wasn't the
Yeah.
best, or the methods weren't the best, because I didn't understand all the principles to the extent that I maybe understand them now. But so that's actually been going on since then, so that's 9 years in the making of programming and coaching athletes. It has, with time, I think the further I got into coaching and also athletically, the more I understood what it takes to continue taking the next step. And just like being an athlete, you if you want to go further, you then need to dial in your nutrition. You need to slow down on work. You need to lower stress in other aspects of life. You need to train more. You need to train twice a day. And just like that, the same was going on simultaneously as a coach. It was like the more I got into it, the more I understood what I didn't understand, and how difficult it was to. And at this point, there's not a lot of, and
Yeah.
still not a lot of knowledge in regards to coaching for CrossFit. You can take deep dives into endurance coaching with triathletes, and you can look into strength protocols from different powerlifters, or weightlifting protocols, gymnastics protocols, and try to put together your own. So I think I spent a lot of time trying
Hmm.
to get more information from all of these expert areas and learn more and more how to implement it in a CrossFit setting, in a setting where you need to be good at all of it. And I, with time, understood that it wasn't just something that you could learn part time. And I think that had been a
Okay.
constant frustration for quite a few years, also because I've been coaching myself, because I've had a lot of great coaches in the past, but I think the coach that I was searching for, I couldn't find, and I also was motivated to create that coach in myself for someone else. And I think with time, I had a lot of frustration
Yeah.
in terms of, it was like a pull push relationship. I wanted to train more to get better, but I also needed to learn more in order to teach myself to get better.
Yeah.
And there's only so many hours in the day. And also, if you're a parent and you want to be good at that, and you want to be a good spouse, and you want to be a good brother and son, and all of these other things, then time is very limited. And the last few years, I've been pushing myself to 10 out of 10 with trying to manage all of the things and try to become really good at all the things. But you just can't become great at any of them if you don't commit yourself more to one than another. And as I was
Yeah.
my own coach, it wasn't an option that I could just say, all right, I'm outsourcing this to this guy. He's going to take care of it. Because that guy was myself. And I've enjoyed coaching
Yeah. Yeah.
myself for 4 years, but to take it to the next level, and there's always a next level, a new level of understanding energy systems, or strength, and all of these things, understanding how to put it together, understanding the psychological part, understanding the environment, how that affects you. And I think I just reached a point halfway through the season last year where I was like, I don't, we just won the semifinals on the team. We just qualified all our rookies to the like 3 rookies to the
Yeah.
CrossFit Games. And I was very proud of it, but I was also not very happy with it, because I didn't feel that I was
Okay.
100% committed to being the best athlete I could be, even though I finished 23rd in the Open, which was my best Open ever. Um, and
Hmm.
I have done my numbers were as good as they'd ever been. I just were feeling that I was leaving a lot of gains on the table, but I couldn't pick them because I had these other responsibilities, which I also love. So that's the challenging aspect. I love the athletic part, but I also love the coaching part, and balancing them both for a long time. Just I felt like I was at a stage. Also now I'm fortunate to coach a lot of really high level athletes, and
Yeah,
my
yeah,
commitment to them is bigger than it was to myself, and that's also who I am. I prefer
yeah.
to. I find more motivation in trying to serve others than serving myself. I think that's a common theme amongst human beings. Like you doing something bigger than yourself always feels more rewarding. And so working with these guys,
That's very true.
yeah, I wanted to go all in to help them and also help our whole CrossFit community with the no shortcuts training that we have. And I was just realizing more and more that I was okay at my job, but I wasn't great at my job, and I wanted to be great at it. And
Yeah,
that requires a lot of studying, a lot of understanding, a lot of implementing. Luckily, I had a lot of, I would say my strength is that I've been through it all. So I have a really good feel and touch for training volume, fatigue, interference, a lot of the challenges that maybe a coach that haven't trained twice a day at that level for this long or competing at that stage would have a difficulty understanding how to put that puzzle together. And I think in the end of the
yeah,
day, putting the puzzle
yeah,
together is the biggest challenge. Understanding energy systems, understanding training adaptations from X, Y, and Z is not simple because we still don't understand all about it. But I did feel I was getting a very good understanding on how to putting together. But I needed more time to understand the physiology behind it. Because if I can't continue
yeah, yeah.
designing new methods if I don't understand the principles to a very deep level. Um,
Yeah.
I didn't, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. I fully understand what you mean. I'm actually a little bit in a similar situation in my own life now. So that's funny that you say this. I'm absolutely agreeing. There seems to be, I mean, maybe that's a something that many elite athletes have, but there seems to be some kind of a perfectionist in you, which obviously I don't mean
No, no.
bad, but that is also how you excel at a certain skill, being it CrossFit or even some other skills, obviously. Maybe just to touch upon that, um, CrossFit is an interesting sport, or hybrid sports are interesting sports because you have this endurance parameter and the strength
Mm,
parameter. And there's other sports where you have this, but in CrossFit, it's the goal to do them
hmm
both. Right, you do the 5K run in the games, and 5 hours later, you do the CrossFit total, which is of
mm,
course 1 RM strength. Literally, that is the goal of the sport. Which before CrossFit existed, this didn't really happen in sports. Do you, in your programming, take this into account? Meaning, do you think about the interference effect, where strength interferes with endurance and vice versa in your designing of training plans? Do you separate them, or do you just keep it CrossFit-y where you do it, let's say, at the same session?
Um, I'll start by saying it depends. I think it
Yeah,
A depends on if it's a generic program that you're trying to deliver, or if it's individualized, and then also how the individualized person
yeah,
responds to it.
makes sense.
Like, and you learn, for example, with Yele Hoste, we have
Yeah,
one approach we could use would be to try to separate it far from each other because he's very aerobically fit, but is not very neurologically effective. Is not very good at firing also his muscle fibers. He's not very prone to being strong, and
yeah,
so with him, he could definitely be the type of athlete where we try to separate it further. And that could be something we try to do at a certain time of the year, and then as the season gets closer, that's something we put more and more together. With the generic programming that we
yeah,
design, there is 3 seasons. There's the off season, the preseason, and the in season. And depending on where we are in the season, we will fluctuate the week design in terms of if it's a more strength bias session, conditioning bias session, or sometimes
yeah,
we bias it in like heavy days moderate days and light days, and we try to fluctuate it between like
Mm-hmm.
Monday being a more heavy day, more neurologically taxing day. Next day, and when I say heavy, light, moderate, it's in terms of external loading and not so much in terms of
Yeah, yeah, of
energy.
load,
Yeah,
training
not in
load.
terms of
Yeah,
like energy systems. So it could be a heavy day
yeah, I see what you mean.
followed by a light day. So that would be more conditioning gymnastics bias. And then we would have a moderate day where we
Mm-hmm.
work more on submaximal loading. And then there would be an active rest day or an easy day, and then heavy day, and then moderate day. So that's one way to like fluctuate the or periodicize or undulate the interference a bit. So you don't have um, 5x5 heavy back squats and then 60 minutes zone two biking that we would never design in one session.
Yeah, yeah,
So we never design things that are
yeah. Okay.
that opposites of each other. It always has to be something that is kind of in a follow-up or has no interference. So there could be
Yeah,
1RM back squats together with gymnastics. And even if the gymnastics was volume biased because of the low interference between the two, um, we wouldn't we would still be able to put them in the same session. However, when the
yeah,
season gets very close, even though we still try to separate it, there is of course a lot more interference.
yeah.
It's a lot more put together because you need to be able to put it together, which means that maybe the snatching is very progressive in the off season. It used a lot of snatch pulls and overhead squats and very simple. And then towards the season, we're having to also build your snatch under fatigue, pre-fatigue, post-fatigue. Um, so yes,
Of
we
course.
do think a lot about it, and we do try to periodicize it weekly and monthly. And also depending on where we are in the season, the program will be biased more towards certain aspects of the training, whether it's more strength bias, more conditioning bias. That all depends. I also just
Yeah,
want to touch on
that's
that.
super interesting
I
because
do
I was
think
just
that
reading
to
quite.
some extent that you can move a lot of the parameters simultaneously. It's just a question of how much you can move them. So if you undulate it a lot,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
can move one aspect very fast and the others don't move, or you can choose to try to move all of them or most of them. And I think you can. It's more like a brick by brick process. And we use a lot of this. So we don't do an off season where you don't do any conditioning and just focus on strength. We will never periodicize it
hmm
to that extent.
yeah, yeah. Periodization. It's basically just managing the load,
Hmm.
right? Like there will be some off season potentially for elite athletes or for even normal athletes where they could keep on doing everything but just potentially at a lower intensity or just lower weights or lower volume, something like this. But pure periodization, there's actually also not so much evidence that this is that this is so beneficial for an athlete. So I think that's a very cool approach. If you look at, for example, I was looking this morning at a study on the interference effect in rugby
Yeah.
players, because rugby is one of the sports that
Hmm.
could be
Yeah.
some kind of hybrid
Hmm.
sport, right? They have to run a lot and also must need a lot of muscle mass and strength. And what they did, super interesting actually. They had a group, they had three concurrent groups or hybrid groups,
Hmm.
right? And they did strength training, half squats, and typical high velocity, high strength
Hmm.
parts where they did half squats and
Hmm.
bench press, what rugby players do. And then they did conditioning after that, like 15 seconds of sprinting rest, 15 seconds of sprinting rest, this for 20 times. So for them, this is endurance
Hmm.
conditioning for rugby players. And they did this right after the strength, 6 hours after the strength, or 24 hours
Hmm.
after the strength. Repeated twice for 7
Hmm.
weeks. And then they want to know if VO2 max was affected or strength parameters were affected. And actually, quite interestingly, when you did the conditioning straight after the strength, there was an interference effect, meaning they did exactly the same type of and volume of exercise, they did actually have a more reduction in VO2 max, and most importantly, more reduction in strength.
Okay, interesting.
So that is why I think, that's definitely interesting. I will link the study also below,
cool.
because this is very relatable to what you would think about as CrossFit. Is if you are a coach and you have the possibility to work with elite athletes who have the time, obviously, if there is an opposite training paradigm, try to do this as much separated as possible. And there you will have the least effects, let's say, mostly on strengths. Actually, the effects are the strongest. So that's also molecularly affected. The endurance affects molecularly strength and vice versa, obviously. So that's something that I'm thinking about a lot in CrossFit, and it's very difficult to manage. Some coaches don't care at all. They just do typical CrossFit back squats and then a WOD. Some coaches like you are thinking a bit more about this. It depends. It depends a little bit, and also on the athlete.
But it is definitely just say it is definitely
go ahead.
Very difficult to separate it that much because of the many themes that you need to touch within gymnastics, within strength, within weightlifting, within engine or endurance. And I think that's really the biggest challenge. And that's why I also think tracking the data and looking at how the athletes are responding is what's most important. Because I mean, all science we can dive into and learn about it's fantastic, and it's essential to try to get closer to understanding what works and what doesn't work. But in the end of the day, the only thing that matters is velocity and weights, or placements on the leaderboard. So if your athletes are lifting heavier and moving faster in workouts and scoring more reps, that is the main parameter that we want to have, that we want to look for. And if the programming is taking you in that direction, then we're winning. And we try to be very data driven and try to use as many tools as we can, as much knowledge as we can to design programming to get you to that stage. But in the end of the day, the only thing that does matter for us is you're placing higher in the quarterfinals or in the semifinals or at the CrossFit Games. And if we're not getting you to that stage, then it doesn't matter if you have heart rate monitors and NIRS devices and if we need to take you there. But of course we can, if we want to try to use all the tools in the toolbox to try to specify the training to get you higher on that leaderboard.
Yeah. As a slight counter argument to that, obviously I believe, but playing devil's advocate, obviously if you work with very good athletes, if you throw anything at them, literally any type of CrossFit training, they will get better and they will improve their placing in the leaderboard. I think one of the major difficulties and the challenges as a coach is to find the most optimal and most efficient plan.
Exactly.
You see, and that is very difficult because obviously you cannot do a scientific study with an elite athlete. You cannot program a certain programming for year 2022 and then completely change it in 2023. Maybe when the results were really bad, you could think about this, but this is the art of coaching, and I think science is only a small part of it. I think most of it is experience, understanding the athlete. And now maybe we can talk about this. There is some advancement in technology, mostly wearable technology, that could potentially help you. Are you aware of that? Are you working with some NIRS measurement devices, heart rate monitors, training loads, RPE? Do you use this, or how do you see this?
So actually 5 years ago, I used one of the first NIRS devices on the market called Human. They went bankrupt, so couldn't use that further. That was when I was working with one of the training think tank coaches, Kyle Roof, who's a fantastic coach and was a great mentor of mine. And I think at that point we still didn't know enough. Maybe I wasn't also at the level where that amount of detail was gonna be a big difference maker. But I think at that point we also weren't too sure how can we use it. And I think even today, we're partnering up with TrainRed, which is a device actually recommended by you, and we're using that in our top athletes on their day-to-day training. So we've been looking a lot into All the stuff from Evan Piken. I've also had some help from one guy named Jeffrey from
Yes.
France, who's been helping me in understanding how to understand basically the limiters from an energy system standpoint, whether so we can use
Yeah.
use these devices to better understand whether the athlete has the respiratory limitation. So if they're limited by their ability to pull in oxygen and get rid of carbon dioxide, or if they have a cardiac limiter, like the heart's ability to deliver the blood with the oxygen that we have taken
Yes.
from the lungs out to the
Exactly.
working tissues, or whether it's a muscle limitation where the muscle is not effective enough in utilizing the the
And
yeah,
extracting it.
extracting the oxygen from the hemoglobin and putting it into the mitochondria so we can get energy or produce energy. And there's still not a lot of like information, I would say, about this. I mean, I'm trying to consume everything from Evan and trying to also design my own protocols, using it to get a better understanding of not just using it for test retest, but using it on a day-to-day basis. I think that's what's really interesting. If we can make sure, okay, even regardless if your athlete is more prone to be limited, if we discover they're more prone to be limited by respiratory or delivery or utilization, with energy systems, I have learned that it's not a light switch. You don't just turn on your
No,
anaerobic system and then
it's a complete blend.
exactly, it's like a dilator. And and it's the same with whether you have
Yeah.
one of those three limitations, and it's always maybe one more than the other, but it doesn't mean that you're not touching on that thing. And that's the same with like why I think actually the more I've been doing also generic programming, I realized actually how good that a generic program can be, because even if your athlete is extremely limited by one thing or really prone in one way, there's only so much you can do. So even if your athlete is
Yeah.
extremely limited by strength, well, you can't do strength 6 days a week. You can't squat 6 days a week because the tissue cannot handle it, or the joints cannot handle it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and the same with if your athlete is utilization limited. I mean, you can't just hit them with, sprints, repeat sprints every single day, even if that is maybe the most
No. No.
optimal training type to fix that limiter. So no matter what, you're basically you're giving them everything they need to, and then you can specify it more. And I also think that's how we designed the year. It's some parts of the year there's more things towards this type of limitation and more things towards this and then more things towards this. And so yeah, we try to use train rate and heart rate to help us navigate that better, even if we know that the
Yeah.
data that we get from it is not 100% accurate. Well, nothing is 100% accurate other than maybe not
Yeah.
even placements, because the placements are also affected by 1,000 things, such as uh, judging or sickness or event details. Most importantly, like one athlete can be number one in the world one year and maybe number 15 the next year because the events were less in their
Yeah.
favor, or maybe some of the main competitors were injured, or
Absolutely.
there's a million things. So I think it's just another tool that we can try to utilize in order to, I think, when you design programming, it's like you have X amount of money to spend, and the money represents the the reps that an athlete can handle throughout the week. And your job as a coach is to make sure you spend
Exactly.
every rep as effective as possible, and that's a very big
Yeah.
challenge. And that's why using devices or um, yeah, navigating the program in a certain way is just key, because like you said, you can throw something at someone and they most likely get better. But it's not I think that the misunderstanding is that training is not about getting better. It's about getting better faster than the others. It's about,
Then the
yeah,
others.
it's not just about getting better. It's about that curve being more steep than your competitors. So if you go
Yeah.
watch, if you go to a competition and you want to be on the floor one day, well, those guys are most likely not going to retire the next 5 years. So if you want to be on that floor and they're there and you're here and they're going to keep getting better, your curve needs to be way more aggressive than theirs. And that's exactly what the illustration I always had in my head in like since 2015. It's like, if I'm going to catch any of those guys, they're same age as me. I'm gonna have to not start dialing in my nutrition in 2 years. I need to dial in today, because that's the only chance I have of making my curve maybe a bit steeper than somebody else's and eventually out edge them. And I think that's just so
Yeah,
important to remember.
I agree.
Being better is it's not that difficult to get better. If you train consistently and you don't get injured, you're most likely to get better. But it's about how much better you can be, and that's why programming detail does matter. I think I've just listened to a lot of podcasts where it's about that the programming doesn't matter and all the programs are the same. And I just don't really agree with that. I think the programming matters like crazy. And of course, environment matters too in terms of training partners and sleep and all those things. But the programming is, I would almost say, 50% of the job. If the program is not good, well, then you either get overtrained and injured, you get undertrained and not progress, or you find a sweet spot in the middle and you blast through it. Um,
Exactly. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And obviously, this is the art. Again, this is the art of programming, and it's not easy. It's definitely not, yeah, super straightforward
no,
to put all the pieces
no.
together. Related to NIRS, so why I ask you, because I'm very interested in NIRS, because what actually one key factor here is important. And out of all the wearables that we have now on the market, NIRS is one of the few, together with a heart rate monitor around the chest, that actually can actually accurately measure what it has to measure.
Hmm.
Okay, so oxygenation by NIRS, if you put it obviously on the same spot, and you have a person that doesn't have too much adipose tissue, which elite
Yeah.
athletes don't have, it actually measures it quite accurately. And that's why I always tell guys like you and other people, try NIRS, see if it works for you, but at least it's
Mm.
accurate. Right? If you have like another wristband heart monitor, we get this with wod-science all the time. Hey, my heart rate is lower during a CrossFit workout than when I'm going for a commute with my bike. Yeah, dude, that's because these wrist monitors are not measuring your real heart rate because of all kind of
Yeah.
problems, and that's something that annoys me. And with NIRS, at least, data has shown that it's quite reliable. I mean, it's reliable enough to
Yeah.
work with as a coach, and it could actually help you in some ways. Because, for example, one of the things that I'm always interested in, maybe you can help me, maybe you've done some of those experiments, is what is the effect of blood flow distribution? So what
Mm.
I mean with that, what you see a lot in CrossFit is that you have a bike sprint, 30 calories on the bike, or even not a sprint, but just a lower body cyclic
Mm.
movement. And then you jump up to the wall and you do handstand push-ups, for
Mm.
example, right? Obviously, most of the blood will be pulled in your
Yeah.
thighs, in your lower body, and you always feel more fatigued after such a movement compared to when you did not do the lower body cycling.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
think that's
Yeah.
everyone that has done some CrossFit or hybrid training has felt that. And can we pick this up, and can we train this or at least monitor this with NIRS and see if there are differences between athletes? Because yeah, that's the whole point about
Mm.
CrossFit, right? You have to be able to keep moving under high
Mm.
fatigue, and actually when there is maybe insufficient oxygen delivery because of previous
Mm.
movements. I'm not sure if you it's obviously a very detailed question, but I don't know if you have similar experiences or used NIRS in that way.
We haven't used it in that way, but I think it's interesting. I mean, CrossFit
Okay.
is about being able to distribute blood flow between upper and lower body, and
Yes.
some of the NIRS monitored sessions that we're using with some of the top athletes right now from Evan. And I think these are the delivery limited working sets.
Yeah.
We're using these intervals where you fluctuate between upper and lower body movements. So it could be front
Interesting. Yeah.
squats into ski erg into step ups into or box jumps into handstand push ups and training that ability
Yeah.
too. So I think we haven't like been looking exactly at how effective the athletes are compared to each other or if they have improved. I think that could be interesting to run the exact same workout and see if their delivery has improved. So having one monitor on the leg, and
This you could do,
of
obviously. Yeah.
course, but it's not something we have looked into that much. I think like the past couple of months, I've
Yeah.
really just been trying to learn a lot more about the energy systems and respiratory system. We've also had some conversation with Luke from Isocapnic, and we have all the athletes use
Yeah.
a respiratory trainer from the
Yes.
Breathe Way Better. This product is a really cool product, and all the athletes are really liking that a lot in
Yeah.
order to isolate the respiratory system. Just like you could isolate your quad in a leg extension, you can sort of train your coordination and your efficiency of your breathing mechanics, and so that, and then as well as the NIRS devices. And yeah, I feel there's, and this is what is exciting, is that there's still so much information that feels like it's left on the table, and that, I mean, even speaking to a lot of experts with, or listening or speaking to a lot of experts within the field, it is not a very clear. There's nobody who has like very clear protocols
No, no,
on
no,
this, and
no,
especially not in
no.
CrossFit, where it's such a difficult sport to understand, because the athletes carry so much muscle mass, so their limitations are very, very different compared to the endurance athletes, and that's why it's interesting to look at heart rate and oxygenation of the muscle, because it's two very different limitations, and one can be looking very fine, and then another one is not very good. And I think it's just really interesting
Exactly.
to look at that data and try to understand it and comprehend it, and make the programming help those things. And even just like we wanted to set up like a testing protocol every 6 months. We also talked about that, in order like a step test, for example,
Yeah.
and then have some maximal strength test, and then have a CrossFit test. And we could use NIRS devices on all of the tests. And maybe the NIRS device is not very effective on the strength test, because it's primarily neurologically, and you actually have devices now that can move, that can um, check their neurological recruitment. I'm not sure how effective they are, but
Yes.
that could be also something
That's
that's
super
interesting
interesting.
to look into. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, and then you see the importance of these things, right? Like I've been doing also CrossFit for maybe longer than
mhm.
you, and I always found that I had the same similar, not similar idea as you. I was very good at neuromuscular and strength and explosive stuff. But once there was a workout, I was very
Mm,
mediocre, always, and still am. And I was always thinking, like, how is this possible? Like, I'm actually back squatting these guys 30% more, but then there's an easy workout and they beat
mm,
me easy. And I had obviously no idea. But then I did some kind of test where it's a 5-1,
yeah,
5-5, 5-1-5 test. I'm sorry, 5-1-5. It's kind of a
yeah,
step test where you can, in some way or another, at least on a grand scheme of things, you can assess your if you're a delivery
yeah,
if you're a delivery constrained athlete and so on. And I was very, 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 very clearly a delivery constrained
yeah,
athlete. Like my limiter was clearly my cardiovascular output and so on. So if I would have known that 5 years earlier, I could have done, instead of all these workouts like this, what typical CrossFit was, I should have done interval training, 4x4,
mm,
3x3, and so on, to improve my cardiovascular capacity, And that's, I think you see this a lot in people in the regular gyms as well, like
mm,
with normal affiliate programming. They just do 5 workouts a day and they don't improve anymore. And many of those are pretty muscular and probably have a delivery limitation. And so that's why I think if the sport progresses and people like you stand up, and also affiliates that know a little bit about programming and even about
mm,
sports science, you can actually help your regular people as well, and not only the elite athletes. That's I think a certain fact.
mm,
By integrating NIRS, for example, into a testing session
mm.
once a month or
Yeah,
something like this. I mean, it's not that difficult. It's also not that expensive,
no,
and you can, hook people. You can let them understand what is actually physiology. It's not only just doing 5 rounds for time
mm,
every day. Like there's more to it to become the better version of yourself, to become a good, let's say, hybrid athlete. And it's not that straightforward, because we don't really know how it all
no,
works, and even scientists are sometimes I would say flabbergasted by how crazy the weights that these guys put up and also the running times and so on. I think 20 years ago, a sport scientist would have said, yeah, this is impossible. Like, what are you even doing? But yeah, there is a way to train them both. That's for sure. I think, and that's what the last 20 years have shown very clearly.
Yeah, and that's only the psychological side.
That's why I think your job is quite interesting.
Sorry, that's only the physiological side.
Exactly.
So, and that's just one third of the picture. The other parts are the psychological part and the environment, and we always talk about, like, it's like there's a car, there's a driver, and there's a road, and the car is the physiological part. It's the energy systems, it's your strength, it's how you adapt to all these things. It's and then there's the driver, which is the psychological part. It's like, how do you handle pressure? Can you make it hurt? Can you go to the dark place? Like, all of these things. How do you compete? How do you handle when other people are next to you? How do you handle if somebody smack talk you? How do you handle when you bomb a workout and there's 6 more events to go? Like, there's so many things, and I would say that one is equally as big as your fitness, especially at the highest level, where strength and conditioning levels are very similar, but the psychological aspect plays a huge factor. And then there's the road where the car drives on, and that's kind of the environment. That's how you eat, sleep, and stress levels and private life, and
stress levels,
like so many things.
It's such a big
and that's honestly also one of the reasons why I knew that I didn't want to continue, because I couldn't remove my work and a lot of other things, and that were causing, even if it's positive stress, it was just draining like, you have a battery, and if what we try to do with the top athletes is that to make sure that there's 90% of the battery is just for training and adapting, and then there's 10% that only get used on private stuff or whatever. But if you have a job and it takes 50% of the battery, it's there's only 50% left for training and adaptation. So even if you train the same amount of hours as somebody else, it doesn't matter. Like, we see this 1,000 times. People think that games athletes, they train 8 hours a day. In reality, they train the exact same hours as everybody else who can make it to maybe top 10% in the world. But the difference is that they have everything else around it dialed in. They're way more focused on the details in training. They're much more effective, and then they're also just more gifted. And that whole combination is what makes their 4 hours of training way more effective than somebody else's 4 hours. And
so one of the interests of mine also scientifically is muscle memory. So it's kind of what you just explained. Is for example, Wout van Aert, famous cyclist, Belgian cyclist, a hero of mine. Obviously, he crashed in the 2019 in the last time trial of the Tour de France, right? And he crashed. He opened his complete leg. And 5 months later, so it was completely open, like a gaping wound. 5 months later, he won a cyclocross again. So there was some way of muscle memory. After a period of inactivity, he could come back quicker than an average human being. And I think there's not that much known which genes and which molecular mechanisms are related to that. So why are some people, when you give them a certain stimulus, which is potentially the same as as for another person, they just respond much better, being it muscle memory after a period of inactivity or an elite athlete, as you just described. And this is not only important for top physical performances, but if we can understand this better on a, let's say, normal level, like sedentary people, we can get the benefits of sport or even activity to a higher level if we can actually target those pathways to improve them faster. That's a little bit my thought process. And we're very far from this, obviously, but there are certain genes and gene clusters that are actually just epigenetically differently regulated by those people. So there is a reason why an elite athlete actually improves better. It's not obviously psychologically and so on, but I mean biochemical reason.
But do you think...
And science is not there yet. Go ahead.
Do you think that... so obviously the genes play a huge role there, but like it's just my own experience. I was never very strong, always pretty powerful. I couldn't back squat over 185. and I couldn't break through this plateau. I was doing Russian squat cycle, all this kind of stuff, and then I
You mean before
no,
CrossFit?
this is like until 2020.
Just
It's only in like 2020 I
okay.
unlock a new level. It's because I meet this one strength coach named Kasper Winter from Denmark. He's a brilliant guy. If you need to talk strength, you need to have this guy on the podcast. But
Okay.
outside of learning
Okay.
1,000 things, one of the main things we changed was that we were having me understand that to be effective neurologically, you also need, this is when you are under heavy load, of course there's something that naturally happens, and you know that it's heavy, so your body's ready to push hard, but it's voluntarily how hard
Yeah.
you are going to push. And the minute I understood how much is voluntarily and how much adaptation that lies in that. So like when you back squat, if I back squat 140 and it's a low percentage, I can just back squat it, and it's one rep and it gives one stimulus. Now if I back squat it as fast as I possibly can and contract as hard as I possibly can, it's a different adaptation. And the minute I start doing that, I put 20 kilos on my back squat in like 3 months and 15 kilos on my clean. And I was like, oh my God, I've been doing all this training for all these years. And I'd been thinking about it in gymnastics, like, okay, pop my hips and be really effective here and whip back on the rings. And that little whip is going to save me in that transition. But when I picked up a barbell from the floor, I never thought, rip it off the floor as fast as you can, as hard as you can. And the minute I started doing that, all my numbers and all my lifting, it just changed. I became so much more neurological effective. And I think what you're referring to now with the cyclist and being back, like once you've built those neurological pathways, you still have them. Like I have been like a bit irregular with my training because since the CrossFit Games due to a lot of things. But if I go into the gym right now, I can still power clean 160. And that's like 5 kilos off my heaviest power clean. But because the pathways are still there, and I can still power snatch 120, and it's just crazy. And it's the same when you learn like crossover double unders. If you've practiced it deliberately, and I mean like deliberately, your brain is thinking about what it needs to do, and it reaches a stage of unconsciousness where it just sits. Like if I go in and do it now, I can still do the same amount that I could do maybe 6 months ago or 8 months ago. And I think that's just such an easy win for all CrossFitters that might be listening to this. It's like, just make sure anything strength related, particularly weightlifting, is if you're effective in your mechanics already. Like that's why we use the hack squat, because it allows me, even if I don't need to focus on the mechanics. I just need to focus on their neurological output on an exercise. Because like in strength, there's their neurological part, which has like 2 segments, which is like coordination, like how well you can coordinate an exercise, and then there's the output. And if you don't coordinate the exercise very well, you can't put a very high output. But if you're in a hack squat, you can have a maximal output without having to worry about the coordination. And when you combine the two, then you will smash through any strength plateau. And then of course there's like the peripheral, which is out in the tissue, like the actual adaptations. But I just definitely think that, just in terms of what you were saying with him coming back so fast, that's why we can also see Tia Claire Toomey when people are like, oh, that's unbelievable. Well, she's of course incredibly talented and gifted, but it's also because she has reached a certain level where, like, even if she's out for 1 year, because the neurological pathways are still there. And I think that's the problem with steroids, if I'm understanding right. It's like if you build those pathways to lift a certain load, then even if you don't take it anymore, you're still capable, even if you lose some of the muscle mass, because the neurological pathways are equally efficient as they were, right? Or am I wrong? You tell me.
That's so it's very interesting. So what you're referring to always about muscle memory, right? But you have neurological muscle memory, exactly what you say. You never forget how to learn or how to ride a bike. And you also have cellular muscle memory. So that's actually in the muscle. You have certain cells called satellite cells that could potentially remember previous exercise by epidemiological modifications,
Crazy.
so really genetic modifications because of the exercise. So the from the 70s onwards, we knew that there are some neurological adaptations to exercise. If you then don't do it, or you have a long period of inactivity, you clearly still have it. So just to refer to this as a CrossFit athlete or a person who's listening to this, indeed, movement efficiency, in my opinion, in CrossFit is extremely important at any level, but certainly at like middle to advanced level. If you can move better, you will expend so much less energy for the same amount of work. So, or the same amount of reps. Let's keep it like that. So, indeed, neurological effects of the deliberate training are hugely important and completely neglected by many people. They just go for a workout, but they don't really know how to do double unders or correct movement. So one thing you can definitely improve, indeed, your training or your movement efficiency. But then the cellular muscle memory, there's actually a study from 2013, super interesting, where they gave steroids to mice. All right, and the mice, they grew their muscles in 2 weeks, I think 15% larger. Pure steroids, like via pellet in their back, they got an increased muscle mass. And then what they did, they detrained them, or they put them in a cage without any steroids for 4 weeks. Right, and then what they then did, they overloaded the muscle. So it's a bit of a brutal thing. What they do, they cut a part of the Achilles tendon. So you have 3 muscles or at the calf, and they cut the 2 biggest muscles, the gastrocnemius and the plantaris. So one little muscle, the soleus, takes up all the weight. Good, and then obviously because of that overload, they grow as well, like they hypertrophy. And the muscles that had been on steroids, or the mice that had been on steroids before, they grew faster. So even though after 4 weeks their muscle mass was back to normal, there was some form of cellular muscle memory, and that could there's many reasons why this happens, but one of the things is that these satellite cells, they can remember previous exercise or steroids, by the way, and then they can grow back faster. So there's always a difference between cellular muscle memory and neural muscle memory, but there's always an interference, obviously. So if we can understand that better, we can maybe improve training or improve physical inactivity by the average population, which I think is very important, clearly. So I think steroids mostly have an effect on cellular muscle memory and changing the way the satellite cells understand previous exercise. And there's much to learn, and there's, again, not that much known about all this stuff, but we know it happens, and you see it all the time in the sporting, as you said. Women, certainly very interesting, maybe for the women who are listening. I mean, the speed these women come back after pregnancy. I mean, I'm getting my third kid in 2 months, so I know what I don't know myself, but I know what a pregnancy entails. And I mean, it's a
it's pretty hard. It's hardcore.
I mean, it's pretty large effect, hardcore, right? And then 5 months later, they almost win the Open, which is just insane. And there's a lot of muscle memory involved there as well, I'm sure. And again, we don't know that much about it, and also physicians are scratching their head like, what the hell is happening here? But it's very cool to see. Maybe the last question to kind of wrap this up, super interesting conversation, obviously, is so the team events. You've experienced obviously the team events. You won the team division, as you said, in Europe semi-final 2023. What do you think is, or what do you think is a key element to do well in a team event, or in a team event in CrossFit? How did you perform so well?
If I had to rank it in like most important to maybe least important, I think that most important is that you have 4 individuals at the same level and at as high level as possible. That's number one. Because if one is less fit than the rest of the group, then in a lot of cases, unless it's a relay, you just can't benefit from having someone who is way beyond someone else, or vice versa. So the more balanced team, the better, and the higher the level of each of the individuals, the better. That's number one thing. that's
Yeah.
more important than how good you are at the worm. Like, I think definitely I've learned that. I mean, if you're deliberate, you can learn the worm and all the synchro very fast. Of course, if you have four athletes in the team that can do 20 plus ring muscle ups and 50 plus chest to bars unbroken, and then it's very easy to do sets of 25 chest to bars synchronized, because everyone is at a level where chest to bars is an unconscious exercise and they have a certain amount of capacity. So if everyone needs to adapt their rep speed, then it's easy. And so that's why really the level of the group is very important. It also makes everybody more
Okay.
adaptable.
You work as a unit.
Exactly. The second thing is, of course, there needs to be good team chemistry, which means that that's like not the physiological thing, but maybe the more psychological or environment things. You need to make sure that
Of
you
course.
you want to do the best for each other, because when there is that, there's that extra incentive to push extra hard, which unlocks that next potential. And team workouts can be brutal. Like, some of the hardest workouts I've ever done is with the worm, because it puts a way different.
I heard that
It's
before.
like, imagine it's like comparing shadow boxing with actual boxing. With shadow boxing, you have your own rhythm, and you have your systems and you do your thing. With actual boxing, you're constantly reacting to someone else. So when you're in the worm and somebody else starts slowing down behind you, you might be lifting, 1/4 of the worm. All of a sudden, you're lifting 40% of the worm, and or if the rhythm is off, or you
Yeah,
you
yeah, of
you know
course.
you're not just doing ring muscle ups in
My
your own
goodness.
pace. Like, alone, you can maybe do 30 unbroken, but when you have to do synchronized and you have to change your whole rhythm and maybe pause on the top, maybe that room takes 10 reps from your max. So there's the
Yeah, yeah.
third aspect is like the team's ability to coordinate the exercises and the actual teamwork. But as I said, if you have four athletes that are very high level, all of these things are easy. Even the chemistry, even if you're not the same type of person that like the same type of things, you all like one thing, and it's winning. And for elite athletes, winning is most of the time above anything else. It's above having a good time. It's above having fun. We're lucky we had a lot of fun as well, but it was never going to be a problem if we didn't, because we all wanted the same thing, which was try to win the CrossFit Games. So that eliminates a whole like section of potential drama or issues. When everybody wants to win, everybody's gathered around one target. So, like, number one, having four really good athletes. Number two,
Yeah,
being
yeah.
set on the same goal. And number three, then making sure that we're practicing all the aspects and being adaptable, and yeah. So I think we failed in achieving winning the CrossFit Games. I was very proud of what we did still. I think we maximized every ounce of potential from that team, and we did everything we could, and so there was no regrets in the end of the season. And that was like the main goal. It's like, hey, if we're gonna do it, we're gonna do it properly. We're gonna go all in, and we don't want to have any regrets. So win or lose, and the end of the
Yeah.
year, we're just gonna know we exhausted every ounce of potential from the team. So they also lived here almost the whole time. We trained like 50% of more than 50% of all our sessions.
Yeah.
It was like, it was pretty intense.
That's amazing.
So yeah, so I would definitely say that
I'm sure.
if you're a team out there, and by the way, on No Shortcuts, we do have team programming every single day. So we try to make it easy for teams that want to form by having a program where the engine piece every day also has a team version that is designed in a specific way to improve your ability to coordinate the worm,
Cool.
coordinate gymnastics, coordinate relays, mixed synchro work, same-sex synchro work, etc. Which makes that a lot easier. We actually have a lot of teams going to this season, which is exciting. But yeah, the main thing is
I'm
just
sure.
make sure each of you work on your individual weaknesses. That's number one priority. Like, the worm synchro work doesn't take a lot of learning, especially not if you're deliberate. Just like being strong doesn't need to take 10 by 10. It could also take 10 by 1 rep if you make sure that one rep is as effective as possible, if that makes sense. That's maybe butchering it. a little bit, but
Yeah, yeah,
we had
yeah, yeah,
watched
for
every
sure.
CrossFit Games event, every semifinal event, and watched every winning team and exactly how they picked up the worm, what their cadence was per rep, in different scenarios, if it was larger sets or smaller sets, and from there you can, I mean, you basically have it on right in front of you, just copy paste. If you have four athletes that are good enough, then it's
Yeah,
just copy paste, and then you
copy
got it.
paste.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, cool, cool. Any future goals?
My goal is just to get my athletes to achieve their goals. Like that's my number one goal, honestly. Like I and that's all the athletes that we work with, and especially of course the ones I work one to one with, that I have daily contact with them. Like I want to take the ones that haven't made to the games, and I want to take the ones that have been to the games higher up the leaderboard at the games. And I don't want to have any regrets at the end of the
Yeah,
year, and I want to make sure that they don't have any regrets. And so we try to do everything we can to make that happen, and that's the number one goal. And the other goal is just to build a good business
yeah,
with a good team. Most important, just a good team. Just because I know that that's the way forward. If everybody's happy with the opportunity and their salaries and their work environment, then I know we can grow and we can improve our service and we can improve our products, and so that's just that's two main goals. And then private goals is just being a good dad and good husband. And now I'll spend a bit more time with my friends that I haven't seen for the past 9 years.
that's also important. That was awesome, Andre. Thanks for doing this. So, where can people find you on the internet? Maybe you can have a little shout out. So I can also put it in the description, but you can tell it here
Yeah,
as well.
just my Instagram handle, André Houdet, or at our no shortcuts underscore training, Instagram. So on that one, you'll find a little bit more programming and coaching
Yeah.
related content,
Okay.
and on mine, you'll find a bit of a mix when I have time.
Awesome.
Yeah, cool.
Good. No, you're doing an excellent job. It was super cool to see you as an athlete, but I'm sure you have a brighter future even as a coach, and we're all looking forward to see
I
this.
hope so. I definitely hope so. Thanks a lot for
Cheers.
having me.